So next up we have Sean. Sean has over 10 years of IT industry experience. He is a product manager for Keeper Security and plays a pivotal role in onboarding partners and their customers to Keeper's password management solution, ensuring digital security at its very best. Beyond his professional life, Sean is a keen footballer and also enjoys watching the timeless classic film that is Grease. Lightning. The floor is all yours, Sean.
Thank you. Yeah, I was saying earlier, I don't think football's for me anymore, to be honest. I'm a bit worse for wear today after playing yesterday. National Cybersecurity Centre tells us that 38% of micro and small businesses in the UK suffered a data breach this year in 2023. And I think it goes back to something that Tom was mentioning earlier, and the fact that breaches don't cost a lot of money anymore if you use a scattergun approach. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is around passwords. It's not the most exciting project, I'm aware of that, so apologies, and I've not got the most exciting voice. Apologies for that. Nothing I can do about it, though. It's what I was born with. I do try working on it. I try like Grease musicals and stuff, and that sometimes helps, but ultimately it is what it is. So if we bring it back to basics with credentials and just try and realise what credentials actually are, it's to help a computer identify that you are the person that you say you are, accessing the sensitive data that's behind the passwords. So it's to help a computer give you the right authorization to what you should have authorization to. Now, this is kind of going to expand a lot on why cyber attackers are really interested in getting your credentials. And ultimately, there's a whole range of ways that cyber attackers can gain access to your credentials. Two of the main ways that we see, brute force being one of them, which, as I'm sure you're probably aware, is when an attacker will just have a whole kind of password dictionary software and just scattergun and use a scattergun approach, as Tom mentioned earlier, and just try and get into your account that way. And if you're using dictionary words or your maiden name or your business name or whatever, chances are the attackers aren't going to find it very difficult to get into your account. So that's kind of making up a large part of that. The other way is again, phishing attempts. So Rob's going to talk more about that later, so I'm not going to kind of step on his toes in any way, shape or form, but that obviously makes up a majority of how these kind of attacks are happening these days. And it just boils down to the fact that they are, low level attacker. You don't necessarily have to be one of these that know everything about the industry and know how to get into machines and you just need to go online, buy some kind of dictionary software or whatever else it may be and use those and create some URLs that look half like what they're supposed to look like, and that's it. So I wouldn't normally single out obviously micro and small businesses in most circumstances, but unfortunately what we do see is that these are less likely to pay attention to cybersecurity needs. And the reason is because ultimately they don't make the headlines when their organizations are breached. But as we saw, 38% of micro and small businesses have been breached this year alone. And a large part of that have come from phishing attempts. Now, ultimately, what that means is they're trying to get your credentials because, again, taking it back to the basics, if we give somebody access to our credentials, that is basically telling a computer that they are us and they have authorization to that. So that's why they do it. So we put in a lot of guidance around how passwords should look and how they should feel to help protect you, to help you create stronger passwords. Now, a lot of that guidance is very confusing. I'm fully aware of that. So we ask you to use phrases, so 3-word phrases, but they should be random phrases. They shouldn't just be 3 consecutive words because, again, those can often be breached as well. So there should be phrases, but in those phrases, you should also have special characters as well. So like exclamation marks, question marks. We should also use capital letters. We should use numbers, and not just 1, 2, 3 at the end. We should use them in between as well. So as you can see, this is getting quite confusing, especially considering that we have to use a different password for all of our different accounts. We can't reuse those passwords. And we also best use MFA as well, which requires a different device, which again, adds its own kind of complexity because it's adding an extra 30 seconds to something that you're doing, and it's asking you to put a code in from a different device. And if you lose that device, that code's no longer there, and therefore you have to reset your MFA and all the rest as well. So the guidance is there for a reason, ultimately, to protect that data that you're protecting with your password. But it's often difficult to adhere to. So therefore, we need to understand a little bit more around modern day solutions to modern day problems. So thinking about the efficiency of passwords now, obviously, we see that most users are finding their own ways to protect these passwords because they're aware that they have to create a strong password. They're aware of ultimately what those passwords are doing and what they're protecting. But ultimately, they're then trying to find a way to save those and secure those in a much better way than just memory alone, which is becoming more and more very difficult. So they turn to tools, and often they turn to free-to-use tools. Now, those are good in a way, but I'll kind of explain to you why they're not good as well. So if we use the browser, for example, although they're good to store passwords because it's adding that efficiency to your life and how you're doing things, because it'll automatically pop up and it'll say, we have this password saved, shall we fill it in for you? Or we don't have this password saved, do you want us to create a new one? Do you want us to sort it in? Do you want us to do this? So that's really helping a user to create really strong passwords, to save passwords so they don't need to remember them anymore. We also see organizations and users turn into Excel spreadsheets as well, which pose its own risks in the fact that they're not often protected inside the network environment either, or they're protected by a single password, and that single password is often very easy to guess as well. So those passwords all stored together are very, very easy from an attacker's point of view to get to. Likewise, if you're storing them to the browser. So although it has a level of efficiency, ultimately, if you think about the storage of those credentials, if your laptop is stolen or compromised, the encryption key that is protecting those passwords is stored in the same place as where the passwords are stored. So it's like leaving your house, locking the door, and then putting the key under the mat. It's if an attacker knows where he's looking, he's going to be able to get that information, and therefore he's going to be able to get the data from there as well. So it's apparent that when we need to save passwords, we need to use technology, really, because as you know, each of us, on average, we have around 35 to 50 different cloud-based accounts that we access on a daily basis. Obviously, it may be different for the user in the room, but that's kind of an average. So if we think about 35 to 50 different passwords we're having to remember, having to create different passwords for, and they all have to have 3-word phrases as per the guidance and MFA, and it just, again, becomes very inefficient. So we need tools, but we need secure tools to be able to do that, especially if anybody in this room has to share passwords as well with other users inside the organisation. To be honest, 70% of organisations that I speak to have to share passwords in some way or another, whether it's their social accounts, whether it's their accounts. Team need to share credit card information securely as well. So it's not just passwords, it's other bits of information that you need to secure as well. But when it comes to sharing, obviously if we're saving passwords to a browser or if we're saving passwords to an Excel spreadsheet, again, it becomes a very, very difficult task for us to do, especially if we think about the privileges and rights that those users should have to those passwords. And we'll talk about privileged access to the credentials as well. And this is when we come on to the compliance of passwords as well. So I'm taking Cyber Essentials as an example with some of these measures that they put in place around password security in general, just to kind of give you an idea of what should be done around passwords, and hopefully to give you an idea of how this will be really simplified with using a tool such as a secure password management solution. So this is guidance. When using passwords, one of the following protections should be used. We should use multi-factor authentication, or we should throttle the rate of unsuccessful or guest attempts, unlocking accounts after no more than 10 unsuccessful attempts. So again, it's fine as kind of guidance. Using multi-factor authentication always plays a pivotal part in security because it's giving you an extra layer of security as well. And then throttling the rate of unsuccessful or guest attempts can happen on a number of accounts, and IT admins and Discus can help with that on a number of accounts, but it's not necessarily relevant for all accounts that we have. Unlocking the account after no more than 10 unsuccessful attempts. Again, if we give the right tools, then we're getting a more widespread of accounts that we can actually enforce those particular policies on. And then technical controls around what's being asked for is one of the following. So either we use multi-factor authentication in conjunction with a password with at least 8 characters long. And again, this can be offered as guidance to your users inside your organization, but trying to enforce these policies is a different thing as well without having the right security measures or tools in place. A minimum length of at least 12 characters with no maximum length restrictions, and a minimum password length of at least 8 characters with no maximum length, and use automatic blocking common passwords on a deny list. So things like dictionary words could automatically be denied. So again, if we have those as a policy set in our organization, it's great. It's a really good starting point, but we're still relying on those users to actually implement that inside their day-to-day life as well, which is very difficult because you shouldn't actually know what a user's password is. So without actually enforcing certain policies, it's very difficult to actually guess or adopt what they're actually doing. And then, again, I mentioned about the guidance earlier, but guidance has been created by Cyber Essentials and other forms like National Cyber Security Centre, for example, where we create passwords from putting 3 random words together. And that's great if you haven't got many accounts. And it's also great if you don't give that password to anybody else. And it's also great if you have every single account with 3 separate random words as well. But then it becomes back to the same problem. We're reusing passwords again, or we're not having very strong passwords because we're having to remember those passwords or store them somewhere that's unsecure or store them somewhere that we can't share with users as well. And so it should be an established process to change passwords promptly if somebody suspects their password's been compromised. Now, we're asking a lot of a user to suspect that their password may or may not have been compromised because, as we've alluded to in a number of kind of slides so far, as previous 2 people did, it's very, very difficult for us to kind of tell when our credentials have been leaked on the dark web. They don't just kind of use them straight away and come back to us and say, we've got your credentials and blah, blah, blah. They'll go on and they'll use them in more sophisticated attacks in most cases, like ransomware attacks, where they will obviously get more out of your organization. So it's very difficult for us to understand unless we have the tools to say, this credential, these passwords, this is on the dark web, this is unsecure, and this, you shouldn't be using this. And therefore have the tools to be able to then reset those passwords quickly by a click of a button. It becomes really, really simple from a user's point of view. Now, I mentioned that many businesses that I speak to on a daily basis have a requirement of sharing passwords. Again, it may or may not be you, but for those of you that this does kind of allude to, businesses do have a necessary need for sharing credentials, whether it be for their social team, whether it be for their accounts team, whether it be engineering team or whatever else. They have a need for sharing passwords in most cases. And in the majority of cases that I see, it's team sharing as well. So not just sharing to one user, but sharing to multiple users. And not just sharing one credential with multiple users, it's sharing multiple credentials with multiple users. So what we want to be able to do is give access to those users of those credentials in a secure environment, but also in a privileged environment as well. So you can only see those credentials if you have the privileged access to be able to see those credentials. Nobody else inside your organization can see those credentials or should be able to see those credentials because they're not meant for you. Now, if we're doing that on Excel spreadsheets, whoever has access to that Excel spreadsheet has access to a full list of the passwords inside your organization and not just the ones that they're privileged to see. So therefore, we need to give them the tools, give them the information, and give them the privileged access to what they require. And this is where we have an element of compliance reporting. So for those of you that are regulated in terms of giving access to certain things to certain users and having to report back on that to ensure you're fully aware of who has access to what inside your organization. As part of the tools that we bring in with Keeper, we have a compliance report, which allows you to see, get visibility in a zero knowledge way to show what credentials people have access to inside your environment, what privileges that they have to access those in that environment. Are they able to see the password, or is the password hidden, and those types of things as well. So it enables us to have full visibility of the credentials inside our organization, and actually what privileges those users have to those credentials. An MFA often is a barrier, obviously, when you're sharing credentials as well, because that's often saved to somebody's mobile device. If they're away or if they're working from a remote site, then we have to email them, we have to Slack them, or we have to Teams them, or whatever else it may be, saying, can you send me that code that I've just fired across to you? I'm trying to log into this account. They then have to fire that code across. That's often through clear text and not protected at all, and that can be picked up in the network as well. So if we have a tool that combines everything and protects everything to the same standard, then obviously we have a tool that enables us to share securely those credentials as well. And then changing shared passwords when a user leaves as well. So one thing that we have to do if we're sharing passwords, if somebody leaves, we have to change all of those passwords because they have full visibility of that, and we need to make sure that they're locked out for future reference. Now, what we can do with tools instead is we can actually hide the password so the user never sees it. So if they do need access credentials as part of their role inside the organization, we can give them the privileges to be able to access those credentials without ever having visibility to those credentials as well. So therefore, it removes the risk of them ever kind of seeing those passwords. And therefore, if they leave the organization, we don't then need to spend however long resetting the passwords that they had privileges to before. So it leaves for a much more secure way of being able to share credentials, if indeed you do need to share credentials inside your organization. I've also mentioned about enforcing strong passwords. So one thing is being able to set policies and how the guidance should look in terms of creating strong passwords. It's another thing trying to give users the enforcement policies. So your passwords must be this character length. You cannot reset passwords to this strength. You cannot use your mother's maiden name as your password. You cannot use our business name. So it's all about being able to set enforcement policies. And you can only do that with technology and tools enabled to do that. So what we see with Keeper Security in particular is they have role-based access controls, because not everybody inside your organization has the same requirements. Some people will need more in terms of what they can do with the passwords. Some people will need less in terms of what they can do with the credentials. So therefore, we have role-based access controls to make sure they have the right privileges for their role. Then we have minimum password strengths. So again, going back to the guidance of Cyber Essentials, going back to the guidance of National Cybersecurity, passwords must be at least 12 characters. They must enforce MFA. Again, we can offer that guidance, but we can't necessarily enforce that guidance unless we have visibility to passwords, which we shouldn't. So therefore, using tools, we can actually enforce those policies, saying, if you try to create a password that doesn't meet this criteria, you can't save it. We're blocked off. You have to create a new one. You have to roll the dice with Keeper. Keeper will generate your password, save it back in for you automatically. So we're also creating more efficient ways of users being able to create new passwords and save them straight back into an account as well. As an organization, it's also important for you to have visibility of any breached and weak passwords inside your organization as well. Again, without kind of giving away full passwords, it's very, very difficult for you to be able to do that. So what we do with Keeper is we offer the zero-knowledge architecture, which uses a hash, which is basically not using the password as such. It's using a hash that randomly generated letters and numbers, and then matches that against anything found in the dark web. So therefore, with that, we can say, right, this hash matches something inside your vault. It's found on the dark web, and therefore you should change that password immediately. So we give visibility to the user, but we also give visibility to IT admins such as Discus, so they can help you out with this, or internal admins inside your organization as well. And therefore, with that, we make sure that we're being able to enforce policies to say, these users can no longer have breached passwords or weak passwords inside our organization. We're enforcing these policies. We also want an easy onboarding and offboarding process. Now, obviously, this is something that Discus will help you guys with anyway, but as part of that, if you bring a new user into your organization, you want them to have and adhere to the existing policies that you've got inside there as well, which will inevitably be password policies. So as part of the onboarding experience, as they're added to your Active Directory and they kind of join a new team, we can then bring them in straight away automatically to the Active Directory as part of that team. And, excuse me. And any shared passwords with that team will automatically be shared with that user because they're in the relevant team. And only the passwords that should be for that team are then shared with that team as well. And a part of the offboarding experience, as that user leaves and they're removed from an Active Directory, they're automatically blocked from Keeper and all their passwords. You maintain visibility and control of those business passwords that they had access to previously, and they're ultimately removed. So the offboarding experience means that we don't need to change all those passwords. We don't need to gain privileges to what they had access to previously. We just need to lock them out of their account, and that's it done. And if certain users inside your organization are not allowed to share passwords, whether it be to you internally or whether it be to anybody externally as well, we can also put those prevention measures in place as well. And we can also prevent users from exporting data from Keeper and making sure they don't save external local copies of passwords outside what you're enforcing as well. So just looking ahead into the future, and I've used Gartner to help with this. So Gartner predicts that by 2025, lack of talent or human failure will be responsible for over half of significant incidents. The number of cyber and social engineering attacks against people is spiking as threat actors increasingly see humans as the most vulnerable point of exploitation. In a recent survey by Gartner, over around 1,300 employees revealed that 69% of employees bypassed their security measures that their companies put in place so that they could get to do their job quicker. Now, a lot of those times, I'm sure you can imagine, will be passwords and saving weak passwords and not having to save passwords elsewhere or using really, really weak passwords, because ultimately that does pose the biggest inefficiency of what users have to manage from a security point on a day-to-day basis. So if we think about that raising to an estimated 74% in 2025, it doesn't appear that this problem is going to go anywhere anytime soon. And nor do we see passwords going anywhere anytime soon. I'm going to touch on the next slide around modern technologies that are coming in place, such as single sign-on and passwordless technology. But I'm also going to touch on the gaps that they kind of leave as well. But important to realise that Gartner predict that insider risk will be the most prevalent risk in the next coming years, because we have technology that can stop AI and emails and ransomware and malware and certain things. What we don't have is things that can stop people giving their password away, ultimately. And it's that password, if we go back to the original thing that I mentioned, that password allows a computer to identify that it's us that's accessing that data. If we give that password away, we're telling a computer that somebody else can access our data. So yeah, there are other technologies coming, and they are great technologies as well. Some of you may already be using them. Some of you may be using them to a degree, but ultimately there are sticking points as well. So if we think about single sign-on and passwordless technology, there are a number of accounts that allow for single sign-on, which ultimately allows you to sign into any authorized accounts using the same credentials, such as Microsoft 365, for example, allows you to sign on to your Excel, your Word, your emails, and whatever else. And then there's other third-party applications that you can bring into your Microsoft 365 as a single sign-on solution. That's great, and you can set security measures in place with that, but not all websites will integrate with single sign-on. And there are other methods of single sign-on as well. So you might use OAuth or you might use SAML 2.0. So there's two different options. If a website matches OAuth and you have single sign-on SAML 2.0, those websites are not kind of bringing into this. So again, that leads us to the majority of websites that we use in single sign-on still secure, but brings us back to the legacy accounts or other accounts that we can't protect with single sign-on still being unsecure because we're using weak passwords. And it only takes that one time that somebody gives that password away. They offer a single point of failure as well in a lot of circumstances, such as multi-factor authentication. I touched on it earlier in the fact that, if you have an MFA code on your mobile phone, you lose the mobile phone, then we have to reset and start again. And therefore, we're no better than somebody trying to reset and start again from being a breach as well. And the legacy accounts I've alluded to as well. They're left behind. Passwordless technology is really, really good. It uses something that you are rather than something that you know, and something that you have as well. So it uses biometrics and fingerprint scanner and all the rest of it as well, which is really, really good because obviously nobody can pinch your face. But having said that, there are a lot of legacy accounts out there that ultimately are not keeping up to date with what should be happening. And therefore, passwords are not going anywhere anytime soon. So if we can find a solution that integrates with the modern technology of single sign-on and passwordless technology, as well as bringing in the legacy technology of passwords and all those accounts that still require passwords, build them together, use one solution for everything. And that's where we see most of the organizations pushing towards. So this brings us on to explain a little bit more around Keeper Security. So just to kind of give you an idea, Keeper Security is a cloud-based secure vault that allows you to store your credentials, whether it be passwords, SSH keys, credit card information, whatever it is. It's a secure vault that allows you to store things in it. It's cloud-based, which is important because it allows you to take those credentials anywhere. If you have things protected by your Apple through Keychain, or if you have things protected by your browser on your desktop, those are kept on separate devices. With Keeper, you have one vault that you can open anywhere. If you can access the internet, you can access your credentials. It's that simple. We also have the browser plugin as well. So if you do use a browser because of its efficiency, use a Keeper plugin instead because it's efficient and it's secure. Really important. Keeper is the most secure platform on the market when it comes to password security. They are the longest standing with both ISO 27001 and SOC 2 Type 2 certified, which basically means that they're constantly audited to prove to auditors that they are doing what they promise they're doing to protect your data. They can store MFA storage as well, so timed one-time passwords into Keeper, which alleviates the need for a second device because we're storing that two-factor authentication code in your vault as well. We also offer secure sharing, as I've mentioned already. The most granular level of encryption. I mentioned about the browser storing the encryption key at the same place as where the data is held, which is weird. But if we think about other password management solutions, there are many out there, but they have encryption key and they have zero-knowledge architecture, which is really strong and really good. But what Keeper do differently is that they have a separate encryption key for every bit of information that you put inside there. So whereas other password management solutions have one encryption key for all the data that you put inside there, which is unlocked by you, with Keeper, if you have 200 records inside Keeper, you've got 200 encryption keys as well, which to you doesn't mean anything apart from it's more secure in that environment. From a Keeper's perspective, they handle the security side of everything. They make sure that your data is protected. From your side of things, we want to make sure that you've got an efficient tool that you can use to protect that data. Which brings on to improved productivity, more efficient, integrates with single sign, as I mentioned, 3-time Gartner Magic Quadrant leader for privileged access management solutions, which essentially means that of all the privileged access management solutions out there, value, range, product, and so on and so forth, Keeper right up there. User-friendly interface. The customer feedback on this, as we can share with you afterwards, it offers a user-friendly interface. It's very, very easy platform to use, which is important when you are rolling anything out like this that a user needs to use. It needs to be that the user finds it easy, because otherwise you're not going to get the adoption rate that you need from this type of solution, and therefore you're not going to get the security you need either. So the important point is that this needs to be user-friendly. I've touched on the other two already, so I'll just skip past them. So just to conclude, businesses need modern-day solutions to modern-day problems. Part of those problems are that, attack vectors are becoming cheaper and cheaper, and really, passwords are still going to be a large part of what that attack vector sees, and therefore we need to protect those with tools. Users want to combine security and efficiency, but a lot of time that's not possible because you either have security or you have efficiency. As what we've seen from the kind of slide that I mentioned, what's coming in the future. If we want to combine security and efficiency, something like this is perfect, where we give them the same tools as what they're using already, i.e. the browser plugin, whilst we're maintaining that enforcement policy from our side and making sure we protect that data. Technologies are coming, single sign-on and passwordless technology that I mentioned, but it's not there yet, and I don't think it ever will be there fully either. So password management solutions like this will be around for some time to come. Sharing must be done securely. If you do need share, it can't just be done through Excel spreadsheets or through clear text environments. Businesses should have visibility to users inside your organization to make sure that they are protecting your data. It is your data, it's just protected by their password. Now we need to make sure that that password is strong as well. If you can reduce the risk of a breach inside your organization, you wouldn't choose not to, I don't think. And MSPs such as Discus are the driving force for SMBs, micro businesses and small businesses to make sure that they are protected. I was talking to a gentleman earlier and he puts his full trust in Discus, and I think that's perfect because they are the experts in the space, and ultimately they will make sure that they give you the right advice and make sure you're plugging in the right information and right tools into your organisation to protect you even further. And that's it from me. Thank you.